Shalom. We continue our study of Pirkei Avot. We are on chapter 5 and the Mishna is number 9. And now, before all the 8 Mishnayot that we studied, they were talking about, they were describing 10 things that happened, either miracles or unnatural things. But now it is number 7. So we begin. שבעה דברים בגולם ושבעה בחכם. Now, first we have to explain what is golem. There are several kinds of people. There's what we call in Hebrew bur, a person who doesn't know much, an ignoramus. There is rek, an empty guy, completely empty. There is one who is known as Am Aretz. He could be cultivated, but has no knowledge of Torah. And finally, you have the Chacham, the smart one, the knowledgeable person, who is also smart in his ways. So, here our sages say in Pirkei Avot, Shiv'at dvarim begolem. You know, there is also another kind of golem, if you heard about the golem of the Maharal of Prague. That's a kind of figure that the Maharal of Prague, with his knowledge of Kabbalah, was able to create some kind of human form with a tremendous power, and he was able to do many things and to offset the will of the enemies of the Jewish people from doing harmful things against them. That's a legend that somehow it is reported in a very serious way, and we believe it happened. The Maharal lived about 500 years ago. But here we are talking about the golem, a person who is not cultivated, not very much cultivated. So there are Shiv'at Dvarim, there are 7 things about him, as well as the Chacham there are also 7 things about the person who is wise, a Chacham. So the first to be described here now with his 7 things is the Chacham, the wise man. Number 1, Chacham אינו מדבר לפני מי שגדול ממנו בחוכמה ובמניין. A wise person will not talk before a person who is greater than him in wisdom and in age. That's a wise person. He listens, but does not interrupt in any way. Number 2, ואינו נכנס לתוך דברי חברו. He does not interrupt the words of his fellow by, many times we see people they don't even let you finish a sentence. That's not very wise. A person that is wise, even if he is in the middle of his conversation with you, as soon as his fellow man is saying something, the wise man keeps quiet, does not interrupt in the middle, does not go into his words, as it says. That's a wise person. Number 3, ואינו נבהל להשיב. He does not answer. I mean, let's say you ask the wise man a question. So some people might answer you with some kind of anger or energy, impetuous people, right? But the wise man is not impetuous in responding. He answers patiently, nicely, gently. Number 4, שואל כעניין ומשיב כהלכה. When he asks a question, he asks something that is relevant to the question, a relevant question. He doesn't ask you a question from nowhere, right? And also when he answers, he replies appropriately. That's a wise person. Our sages say in the Talmud, in Masechet Shabbat, we find that Rabbi Chia said to a certain rabbi who came to ask a question to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the great Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, the leader of the master of his generation. So Rabbi Chia came and said to him, "You're lucky that now you asked him a question that he was able to answer to you, because he was not in that subject. So what you asked him was not relevant to his studies. You want to ask him a question, ask him about a text that he is dealing with now. That's the best way. But you asked him about something completely foreign to whatever his state of mind. Only he is so great that he was able to answer you properly. But you should not. A chacham, a wise person, will ask a question only when it has relevancy with the guy from whom you ask this question, right? Same thing also with answering. He answers appropriately, properly and appropriately. I think this is number 6. ואומר על ראשון ראשון ועל אחרון אחרון. You know, when the wise man, when you ask a question to a wise person, the way he answers, the way he discusses, first he discusses the things, first things first, and last things last. Everything according to the topic, and he goes he doesn't start from the last one. He starts from, say, asked him several questions. Now he begins to answer. First he begins with the first question, then the second, and so forth. That shows that he is wise. Number one, he is wise. Number 2, he is not impetuous. He is calm. He knows how to judge questions. He knows how to answer. And that's besides the knowledge. Not only he has the proper knowledge, but he also knows how to deal with questions and how to answer to people. People are different. You have to know their character and to know how to answer them in accordance with their character. ועל מה שלא שמע, אומר לא שמעתי. A wise person, if you ask him a question and he never heard anything about it, he must be willing to say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I never heard such a thing. So what? It takes humbleness also for a wise person. Sometimes a guy who is arrogant will answer you whatever he wants, even though he never heard any source to the question that was given to him. But a wise person should not hesitate to say, I don't know. There is a certain Talmudic statement in Masechet Brachot where we find that it says, למד את לשונך אומר, לומר, אינני יודע, שמא תתבדה ותאחז. Teach yourself always to learn when it is relevant to say, I don't know. Because you might just say something without any knowledge about it, and then you will be found guilty, and someone will eventually catch you with it, and that's a shame. ומודה על האמת. And number 7, the wise person always admits the truth. You say something that is the truth, he will admit that you are correct, you're right. Unless people with arrogance will keep on debating with you no matter what, as long as their opinion will be the one that is accepted. One should be ready always to admit when the truth is the truth. וחילופיהם בגולם. We spoke about 7 things that have to do with the wise man, and there are also 7 things about the person who is a golem, a person who is not cultivated, doesn't have good manners, is not very knowledgeable, and so forth. So the reverse of all the things that we of all the things that we said about the Chacham. So the reverse of these characteristics are pertain to a person who is a golem, the uncultivated person. That was Mishnah number 9. Mishnah number 10. Again we begin with number 7. שבעה מיני פורענויות באים לעולם, על 7 גופי עבירה. There are 7 types of punishment that occur in the world, and they occur, why? Because of 7 kinds of sins, of transgressions. What are they? Number 1, מקצתן מעשרין ומקצתן אינן מעשרין, רעב של בצורת בא. Let's say the Jewish people, right? They are under the obligation to give the tithes, to give maaser, whether it is money or if it is the what they have harvested from their fields. They have to give 10%, and that's called maaser. Like the Torah says specifically, aser te'aser. Give 10%. Our sages said why twice the words? To tell us aser kedei shetit'asher. If you do the maaser properly and you give your 10%, whether it is in money or any other things, then you will become rich. However, there are Jews who do not believe and Jews who believe. So, in case there is such a situation that only some of them, they give the maaser, they do the proper thing, but some of them don't. This is a situation that might bring famine to the world. הרעב של בצורת בא. Famine is caused by lack of rain, right? It could cause many problems in the world, hunger and so forth. However, if מקצתם רעבים ומקצתם שבעים, and what happened? I mean, it's not fair. Apparently, it's not fair for the people who gave maaser. If famine comes, it hits them also. But here he says, those who gave will be satisfied, will be granted. There is no famine among them. But those who did not will feel the famine. And how? As our sages told us about in the time of the great famine that there was when Yosef HaTzadik was in Egypt, and because of the dreams of Paro, he was able to give him the proper advice, and that's how he saved Egypt, and the whole world was in great famine, and they all came, many of them came to Egypt in order to buy sustenance from Egypt. That's how Egypt became, because of Yosef, became extremely rich. But at the same time, Yaakov and his children, even though they were in the land in which everybody was under the stress of famine, but there was no stress among Yaakov and his children. Only Yaakov, their father, suggested that still they have to go to fetch to fetch food and to buy sustenance from Egypt. That's how they came to meet their lost brother, Yosef. We know the story. And he told them, but Lama Titrau, it's better to go also this way. The world will think that we are also with the problem of famine. And this way there is no jealousy and, Otherwise, if they will not see us, they will think that we are rich, and their bad eye, their evil eye, can cause problems. All right? So therefore, God knows how to do things. Many times there is famine in the world, but there are people who don't suffer at all. Why? You'll find out that they were giving maaser, at least within the realm of maaser. גמרו שלא לעשר. However, if all the population, the Jewish population, they decided not to give maaser anymore, they don't want to, they don't believe in it. So you know what happens? רעב של מהומה ושל בצורת בה. There will be famine, but it will be the kind of famine that happens because there are many bandits and bands. They come to steal, to rob you and everything. So because of them there is famine, plus the famine, the natural famine from the drought, right? So that means everyone is going to suffer. ושלא ליטול את החלה, if they also decided not to separate the challah. When you bake loaves of bread, if you have a certain amount of quantity of that bread, you are under the obligation of the Torah. Today it's not from the Torah, but from the sages, to separate the challah, to take from the dough one piece, right, and to throw it in the fire. That's a very great mitzvah, even though it has also to do with the gifts that in the old time, the time of Bet HaMikdash, they used to bring to the Kohen, to the Kohanim. But let's say they decided not to do that, not to separate challah. Today, thank God, there are many organizations of women who have this beautiful custom now. It is well developed among all women in Jerusalem. They all gather together in separate houses, and they are taught by the one who knows how to separate the challah, the dough, and to do the proper prayer with it and the benediction with it. Why? Because it does bring tremendous benefit for the believer, of course. But if they don't, then you know what happened? ושלא ליטול את החלה, רעב של כליה בא. If they decide, all of them, not to give challah, not to fulfill the mitzvah of the Torah of challah, then what will happen is a great famine of utter destruction, which means famine that is will destroy everyone. Mishna 11. Dever bala olam. Now we have finished with number 7. Now there is another situation. Why is it that pestilence comes upon the world? There are plagues that plague the world, whether in one country or a different country, depending. They were in the old time, I mean, in maybe about 1,000 years ago, there was a plague, terrible plague, the Black Plague that destroyed millions of people, that killed millions of people. So in Hebrew it's called dever, that's pestilence, a plague, epidemic of dever. Why is it that, what is the purpose that Hashem sends the dever, which is so destructive, to the world? So here, dever bא לעולם על מיתות האמורות בתורה שלא נמסרו לבית דין. According to the Torah, if you kill someone, for example, then, and there are witnesses that saw you, then automatically the Beit Din, the religious judges, will have to sentence you to death. And so forth, with every kind of sin that requires death. Now, many times you have many murderers that do it, that they murder and they are not caught. They were not brought to the Beit Din. They were not sentenced. Because of that, pestilence could come upon the world. Because they were not tried by the court, by the religious court, right? Also, for another reason, pestilence could arrive upon the world, al perot shvi'it, for not observing the laws of the sabbatical year, right? Every 7th year, the Torah says, 6 years you can work and plow and sow your land and harvest your land, but on the 7th year, the land must rest. And it has nothing to do with resting. I spoke about this in different times. But it has nothing to do with the health of the earth, like some people say. But it is because that's a commandment of the Torah. And we don't discuss the laws of the Torah, whether we understand it or not. So if they don't, if let's say they did not fulfill, they did not observe this mitzvah of the sabbatical year, pestilence could come upon the world. Now, Herev ba'al olam, the sword of war, of course. Let's say war is declared. It comes, when it comes to the world, for what? Al-Innui Haddin, because of delay of justice. Unfortunately, we see that today, many times, it takes years or months until there is a verdict declared. upon the murderer or upon the guilty party. That's delaying the justice. Delaying the justice could cause pestilence to come upon the world, according to our sages. That's called Innuy Haddin, delay of justice. Or it could come also because of Ivut Haddin. What is Ivut Haddin? The perversion of justice. You know, many times you hear some kind of justice, even given to us by the Supreme Court. But it's not justice, it's a perversion of justice. Like when they decide things against Shabbat and against many things against the Torah. In our eyes it is called perversion of justice. So pestilence could come upon the world. Unfortunately, just a few days ago, after the great show, the Eurovision, when many singers came from all the world, and they decided that it should be done on Shabbat. The observant people, of course, were against that, but didn't help. The majority is not religious, especially that the Supreme Court decided that, yeah, you go ahead and do it. We have paid dearly for that, because when we don't keep Shabbat, then you know what happens? Fire is upon the world. You'll be surprised that many kinds of fire that occur are because of lack of observance of Shabbat. And we know what happened. Until today, there are some villages, beautiful places that were totally destroyed by fire. And that's unfortunately, we believe that it is as a result of the Chilul Shabbat, of the desecration of Shabbat that happened last week in that Eurovision. What can we say? Also, pestilence could come upon the world. Al hamorim b'Torah shelo ka'alacha. You know, if people ask you a question of Torah and you have no knowledge and you give an answer that is not in conformity with the halacha, with Jewish law, that's very bad. Because you are not allowed to do that. Or maximum, all you have to say, I don't know. Or you check. Or like many good rabbis do, will give you the answer tomorrow, and they go and check in the books. But if they give you an answer that is not rooted with the truth, I mean the real Jewish law, then it is something that is quite dangerous, and the pestilence could arrive upon the world. When it says pestilence, it could mean also all kinds of epidemics, all kinds of sicknesses, all kinds of things. You know, every now and then we hear of another eruption of a different kind of sickness. Who knows? Further, the Mishnah goes on further and says, Chaya ra'a ba'al olam al shvu'at shav. Chaya ra'a is the wild beast. Wild beast, like for example, tigers and lions, would come sometimes upon a city and devour people, like it happens many times in India and so forth. And this happens to the world. Why? Because of swearing in vain. One has to be very careful if you have to swear. Of course, it's better not to swear whatever it is. If you can avoid it, it's better. Also, it's better not to avoid making nedarim, vows. Because in case you cannot keep a vow, it costs dearly. But now, if that kind of word is permeated with the sin of swearing in vain, that could bring upon the world what we call chaya ra'a, evil animals. I mean, wild beast will come upon the world. And also it comes upon the world because of the desecration of the name of God. Let's say, unfortunately, a few days ago we heard there is a certain rabbi who is a chief rabbi of a certain location, and he was caught doing for several years things that are not nice, very ugly to hear. That causes the desecration of the name of God. Tremendous punishment is required for that. That's called Chilul Hashem. And Chaya ra'a ba'al olam. You know, Chaya ra'a does not mean wild beast today. It could mean a nation that are like animals. Do I have to tell you who? We have enough problems from them, right? Now, this Mishnah goes on saying, Galut ba'al ha'olam al ovdei avodah zara. For the sin of worshipping idols, which is the cardinal sin, the biggest sin of all the precepts of the Torah, is worshipping idols, foreign idols. So what is the punishment? It could happen that exile is brought upon the world, which means many people from many countries will have to immigrate elsewhere. We know that such a thing happens today. Immigration of many people who run away from Arab countries to other countries. Here they are accepted, here they are not welcomed, and so forth. Ve'al gilui arayot, also for immorality. Exile could happen upon. The Jewish people went to exile several times. So one of the reasons could be also immorality, or gilui arayot. Gilui arayot means, incest and forbidden relations. Also, it could come. Exile could be destined upon the place or the world because of shfichut damim, because of murder, spilling blood. The world today is permeated, even in Israel. A while ago, a few years ago, we never heard of a Jew killing someone. Today, there is almost every day we hear that there was a kind of murder, a kind of assassination. And that's what happens is, it could result in exile. Can we take another exile? I don't think so. Ve'al shmitat haaretz, which means exile could happen because people do not observe the law of the sabbatical year. In fact, this is a known statement by the Talmud that if the Jewish people were brought to exile to different countries because of the law of the sabbatical year that was not kept properly. So we will conclude with this. We still have a few more Mishnayot in this chapter, but we'll stop right now.